Welcome to the Painting Coach, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to paint a brand new Krieg Commissar model from the Death Korps of Krieg Command Squad. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me these awesome minis out early so I can create this content. So I'm going to show you how to paint the Commissar. I'll also put links in this video to how you paint the rest of the Command Squad using my existing Death Korps of Krieg tutorials. So let's get painting. Now the first thing I've done is primed the model with Chaos Black spray. I've then given it a quick coat with Abaddon Black, thinned down quite a bit just to unify any black, which makes it easy to repair any mistakes later on. The first thing I'm going to do is block in all of the red bits, and the colour I'm using for this is Mephiston Red. Now, if you're not sure what you need to paint red, you can check the box art, but basically you've got the lapels on that big coat, you've got the cuffs, you've got some detail around the hat and the collar as well. Now, take your time with this. You can be fairly messy because we're going to paint over the rest of it anyway. But obviously, the less mistakes you make here, the less time it takes to paint the model overall. Next, we're going to paint the silver, and for some inexplicable reason, I've not filmed the silver on the Commissar, but it's the same silver I've used on everything else. So it's just dark aluminium from Vallejo, and just paint this over all of the silver areas, such as the detail around the plasma pistol, and some little bits and pieces around the gas mask in terms of the connection, the pistol holster, and also the buckle on the belt. We'll shade the model using Nuln Oil, and we're focusing this on that Mephiston Red and also the silver across the rest of it. So again, you can be fairly messy with this. This is a nice, quick, easy step. Just make sure you don't put on so thick that it pools. Again, I've forgotten to film the highlighted silver section on the Commissar. I think I'm just trying to get too much done at once. So there's a lesson for you in there as well. But just take some chrome from Vallejo Model Air and just pull this along the sharp edges of the models to get nice crisp highlights. The first thing we'll do is highlight up all that red. We're going to go back to Mephiston Red. And essentially what we're looking to do is leave the darker shaded areas in the recesses, but just paint the majority of those red areas to bring that brightness back. We'll then take some Evil Sunz Scarlet and start to focus this highlight a little bit more. So we're looking for those sharp edges, and in some areas we can drag the brush, but generally we just have to be very careful. So make sure you haven't got too much on your brush and you've got a good tip, and you can just follow the contours, picking out those nice folds. The final highlight on the red will be the Wild Rider Red, and for this we're looking for a nice crisp highlight inside the Evil Sunz Scarlet of the previous step. Now this is a little bit orangey in colour, so use it fairly sparingly. If you do put it on a little bit too thick, like I have in some places, you can just go back in and tidy up with the Evil Sunz Scarlet underneath, so you do get that nice crisp light. Next up, I want to block in the white details. So we're going to do a little bit here with some Corax White. Generally, we're going to look to paint that sash that the Commissar has got. To shade that, we're going to use some Soulblight Grey. We'll then go in with some AK White and use this just to highlight the edges, leaving the Soulblight Grey in the recesses. And this gives you a nice little bit of detail on there. Whilst I've got the AK White out, I'm also going to paint the plasma coil on the plasma pistol. Now we'll take 2 or 3 coats for a nice even coverage. Moving on to all the leather, I'll show you how to get that nice reddy brown effect that there is on the box art. The first thing to do is to base all of the leather using Rhinox Hide, which is a nice dark reddy brown. Now this should cover quite nicely in one coat over the black, but that doesn't mean you want to put it on too thickly. So just take your time with this and focusing on all the leather elements, such as the scabbard on the sword, the belt, the pouches, and the pack covering the oxygen regulator. Once we've got the Rhinox Hide out, we're going to base all of the elements that are going to be the non-metallic gold as well. So we're looking at things like the epaulets, we're looking at the button detail across the front of the chest, and we're also looking at the bottom of the sash and the trim of the greatcoat. Next up, we'll highlight all of the leather using Doombull Brown. Now, this is the main mid-tone for the leather, so we're not going to use any shades or anything. We just want to leave that Rhinox Hide in the recesses. That's going to be our darkest colour. Now with that Doombull Brown, again, this should cover in one coat, but don't worry, because as it dries, it'll blend down into that Rhinox Hide quite a lot, and that gives us a really nice effect and doesn't make the transition too stark at all. The final highlight on all the leather is going to be with Skrag Brown. Now this is a nice bright orangey reddy brown. So what we're looking to do is drag this along the sharp edges of the model, making sure that we're getting nice crisp highlights. Again, if you do apply it too thick, you can always go back in with some Doombull Brown and use that to tidy it up. But generally, we want to use this fairly sparingly. If you want to weather the leather a little bit, then you can do so at this point, just by putting some little nicks and scratches in. Next up, we'll make a start on all of the non-metallic gold elements. Now, again, I'm going to confess in this video, like I do in all the videos I attempt to do non-metallic gold, I'm not very good at it. But what we're going to do is get an impression of it. So take some XV88 and use this to base all of the gold areas that are going to be non-metallic gold. And generally what we're looking to do is paint over that Rhinox Hide that we put down. The key thing here is just be really careful around bits we've already finished, because there will be a few elements that have already got to that stage now. Next up, we'll go in with some Zamesi Desert and start to highlight up the gold elements where we want it to be brighter. So generally, we're looking to add quite a bit of light in some of these areas. If you're not sure where the brightness is, just have a look at the box art, because the heavy metal team have painted them on there. So we're just looking to replicate this really. The key here is just being tidy, and every time we use a highlight, we're adding less and less. The next highlight is with a 50-50 mix of Screaming Skull and Zamesi Desert, and we're just looking to bring this to the real brightest areas where we want to get all of that light. So we're working our way around, such as the top of the hat, the trim on there, the trim around the cuffs, and also those tassely shoulder pads. We'll just put a small highlight of Screaming Skull onto those elements that are going to be the brightest, and generally these are the bits facing upwards and that we think are going to catch the most light. Now, depending on how you like your gold, this looks fairly desaturated. There's not a lot of contrast in it, and that's one of the key things with non-metallic metal, is really building in contrast. So to do that, what I'm going to do is take some Iyanden Yellow contrast paint, not because it's contrast paint, but just because it's going to change how vibrant some of these elements are. So I'm not using a huge amount. In fact, I've got very little on my brush, and I'm just going to brush this along some of those elements. Next up, we'll base all of the gold, and the color we use of this is Dragon's Gold from 2 Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, you can absolutely use Retributor Armor. That's perfectly fine for this stage. It's exactly the same color, but just take your time, because obviously we have got a lot of elements finished. Now, there's a few buttons, such as the skull buttons down the one side of the jacket. There's quite a bit on the scabbard and the handle of the sword as well. We'll shade all of the gold using Rykel and Flesh Shade. Now, key here is to not put too much on, because we don't want it to pull too heavily in some of those recesses. So just work your way across the model. Now, the other thing you can do with the Rykel and Flesh Shade, if you want to add a little bit more contrast to that non-metallic gold, is you can just work a little bit of it into the shadow areas, because again, it'll just add a little bit more of a reddy brown color in there. To highlight the gold, we'll use Glistening Gold from 2 Thin Coats. Again, if you haven't got this, Liberator Gold from Citadel is absolutely fine. But generally what we're looking to do with this is drag our brush along those sharp edges, because it gives us really nice crisp highlights. And that is going to give us a nice glow and a nice sparkly shine across all of this gold. So just work your way across all of it, and you'll get that nice highlight in. We'll paint the gas mask and the wraps along the legs of the Commissar next, and the colour I'm using for that is Zandri Dust. So you are going to have to be really careful here in terms of bits you've already finished. So make sure you haven't got too much on your brush, and just take your time. When it comes to the wraps on the legs, they're not particularly visible, but you will just need to block them in. So just, again, you're going to be working around bits you've already finished, so be careful. For the wraps around the legs, we'll just shade them. We're not going to highlight them. They're in shadow, so we just want to add a little bit of depth. And we're just going to take some Seraphim Sepia to do that. So just carefully brush it over the wraps on the legs. For the gas mask, we'll highlight the majority of it using Ushabti Bone. And again, be careful with this, taking your time. You can see where the highlight needs to go, because it's quite a pronounced shape on the gas mask. To finish highlighting it, just take some Screaming Skull, and this is going to be a much thinner highlight. We're looking really across the top by the peak of the hat, and just under the eye sockets and down the side of the mask where you've got that metallic clip. Now, I've gone back in with Abaddon Black and tidied up all of the mistakes I made on the Commissar, so now it's time to paint all of the black leather details. The first colour I'm going to use for this is Skavenblight Dinge. Now, this doesn't cover particularly well. I'm looking to catch the sharp raised edges on the coat. Now, in some areas I've gone in very thick, and you'll be able to see that as I'm working through it. What I've done then is I've decided whether I like it that thick, whether it should be that light, or whether it should be a bit dark. And I've gone back in with Abaddon Black and just shaded back down over it. So work your way around all the leather elements. So the coat is the main thing. You've got that nice big overcoat. You've got an undercoat on there as well. And also you've got the gloves. Now, like I said, I've gone in and tidied that up, and I'm going to take some Stormvermin Fur and use this as the final highlight on the coat. And I'm looking to get this inside the Skavenblight Dinge of the previous step. So just take your time. Again, a good point on your brush. Don't rush this stage. Just work your way around and add it in, and you'll start to see that coat coming to life. If it becomes a little bit too bright or a little bit too grey, then you can just go back in with some Abaddon Black, thin it down, and just paint it over the area, and hopefully that'll just glaze it and blend it all together nicely. For all the slightly harder black elements, such as the hose on the gas mask, the peak on the hat, the plasma pistol, and the boots, I'm going to highlight them slightly differently. And the color I'm going to use for that is Eshin Grey. So again, this isn't one of those colors that covers particularly well, but it does work quite nicely as a first highlight. So work your way around, trying to keep it as tight as possible. Again, any mistakes really easy to fix with Abaddon Black. Like I said, we're doing the hose on the gas mask, the peak on the hat, the plasma pistol casing, and the boots. The final highlight we'll do for these areas is going to be with Dawnstone. We're looking to keep this inside the Eshin Grey from the previous step. So nice and straightforward. Good tip on your brush. Where you can, drag it along to get nice crisp highlights. But generally, we're not going to use a huge amount of Dawnstone. It's on the plasma pistol we probably need to be most careful because we want this to look quite tidy. To finish up, we've got a few elements where we're going to use contrast paint. So the first thing is going to be painting the plasma pistol coil, and the color I'm using for this is Frostheart. Now just paint this all over the coil and let it dry, and that is as simple as painting plasma pistol coils can be. If you don't want to use blue, use any other color contrast paint that you want. For that gem on the top of the Commissar's hat, I'm going to use Volupous Pink. And again, it's just a simple case of painting the Volupous Pink over the white. With the gem, I do want it to be a little bit darker on the bottom. So when it dries, I'll just put a second coat on that bottom bit. Finally, for the eyes, pop some Baal Red contrast paint into those lenses. If you haven't painted them white already, do that first. And then this model is almost done. And there we have it. This Krieg Commissar is done and ready to command his troops on the tabletop. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and a comment down below. And like I said, check out this video here for how I paint all the other normal Krieg Guardsmen you'll find in the command squad. And if you want to see how I do artillery, there's this video here as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.